Okay, the objective of this lesson is actually to learn about complex numbers so that you can use those in the next lesson when we start talking about solving quadratic equations, and there's no other way to solve them but using the quadratic formula. Okay, complex numbers is an expanded number system which allows you to take the square root of a negative number. Because right now, if you were to take your calculator and you would type in the square root of any negative number, it will say error. And it might say something like non-real or something like that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to manipulate the system so that we can take the square root of a negative number. Alright, so the standard form of complex numbers is this. Right, this is the real component, the part you actually see on the calculator, and this is called the imaginary component, the part you can't really see, so they call it I. Alright, well, I is technically the square root of negative 1. Okay, so if you type in your calculator right now, the square root of negative 1, it will probably say error. Okay, and if you have a graphing calculator and you go to mode, and a little bit down on the screen, almost at the bottom of the screen, it'll say real, and then next to it, it might say, I can't remember, imaginary, or it may just look like this, A plus BI. But if you highlight that, that changes your calculator into a complex number system, and now when you type in the square root of negative 1, it will say I. Okay? And just to let you know where I is located, it is a second function. I believe it's on top of the decimal point. It's one of the bottom ones. Okay, so if I is the square root of negative 1, then I squared is simply just negative 1. And this is really the most important part. This is important too, but this is what you use the most. Okay, so let's look at these. Let's just do some basic problems. We've already learned how to reduce and simplify radicals. We're going to also do the same thing now, but with a negative sign. Okay, so the square root of negative 81, okay, is going to be the same thing as the square root of a number times the square root of a number. Now remember in the past I said to take your perfect square first and then your non-perfect square second. Okay, it's still the case. However, this one happens to be a little easier one. What we want to do is when we make our two radical signs, we want to put negative 1 first, always to start with, and then put the 81 here, because negative 1 times 81 will give me negative 81. Okay, now here's the reason we do that. The square root of negative 1, remember, is I. Okay, the square root of 81 is 9. So we're saying I times 9. We kind of write it like we do variables, and we're going to put the I at the end. So your answer is 9i. Okay, try it on your graphing calculator. Change your mode. And if you type in negative 81, square root of negative 81, it will give you 9i. So there is a little bit of an advantage of having the graphing calculator, but it's not going to give you that advantage on the next one. So we're all in equal playing field here. Okay, we're going to start off with two square root symbols. Okay, remember we always put the negative 1 first, and then 12. Okay, negative 1 times 12 is negative 12. Okay, we haven't changed the problem, we just wrote it differently. Alright, the square root here of negative 1 is just I. And that leaves us with this. Well, on our last problem, that number happened to be a perfect square as it was. This one's not. So now we're going to break it down into two more square root symbols. Perfect square first, non-perfect square second. Alright, so what perfect square goes into 12? Think about that list from previous lessons. Okay, 4. 4 times what is 12? 4 times 3. Okay, so this perfect square, square root of 4, will give us a whole number 2. Okay, we cannot break down the square root of 3 anymore. That's as low as it goes. So then it becomes this. But then don't forget you have this little I here. So it's I times 2 times the square root of 3. So we write it this way. It's 2i, because those are your whole components, and then the square root of 3 next to it. And again, I said earlier, your graphing calculator is not going to give you an advantage here, because if you typed this in your calculator, it will give you a decimal, an irrational decimal, and then with an I next to it.